Where is the agitation for this coming from, the support?
From our perspective, basic income is a policy that in some ways you could almost say is all things to all people. So you have very right-wing advocates of basic income pushing for a very neoliberal version. And then you have a sort of a left liberal lobby that is pushing for a version of basic income that they believe, we disagree, but they believe could be implemented in such a way as to be redistributive and to reduce poverty and levels of inequality, etc. But there's a very large academic and agency-based, I would say, largely lobby for basic income on an international scale.
Yeah, well, that's one of the interesting things about the idea is the diverse quality of its support. You have Silicon Valley types supporting it, and also some people on the far left, both of whom seem to embrace an idea that employment as traditionally conceived is disappearing, and this is a way to keep people alive. And the support across the political spectrum is said to be a selling point. You, however, are not a fan. What is your critique of it?
Perhaps let's look at the Ontario model that's now being experimented with, because it's kind of a checklist of how a system that is called basic income could be used to advance what we might call the neoliberal agenda. So what is being provided is an income that is higher than people receive presently on social assistance in Ontario, but it's still a sub-poverty income. So it's not going to be an income that would enable people to withdraw from the labour market if they chose to, or survive the robot future. It's a low payment. It's going to be provided primarily to people who are waged, but still living on very low income. So it's designed primarily as a wage top-up, which is another way of saying a subsidy to low-paying employers.
That sounds somewhat like our earned income tax credit.
Yes, but of course, if this were introduced on a jurisdictional scale, we're talking about an enormous intensification of the process of topping up people's wages out of the tax revenues. The other element of the right-wing basic income that somebody like, for example, the political scientist Charles Murray puts forward is the notion that basic income must not augment existing systems of social provision, but replace them. So that you become a shopper with your basic payment, shopping for things that once were provided by the state but have now been privatised. And the Ontario pilot contains some of the elements of that, so that people that go on the pilot who are presently on social assistance will lose support for things like hearing aids, eyeglasses, mobility devices, medical transportation, those kinds of things. So already with this relatively generous small-scale showpiece operation, they're beginning to move in that very direction, using basic income to eliminate and privatise existing systems of social provision.
Now, I think there's a certain strand of the libertarian left that finds that somewhat appealing, that they see the welfare bureaucracy as intrusive and patronizing, and poor people shouldn't have conditions placed upon their assistance. They can make those choices themselves. So the welfare state is seen as intrusive and heavy-handed. What do you say to that kind of that argument?
Well, of course, there's absolutely no doubt that existing systems of income support are rooted in the sort of the tradition of the English poor laws, and they are indeed intrusive, and they are indeed sub-poverty and inadequate. And we as an organisation challenge that on an ongoing basis and demand an end to bureaucratic intrusion, and we fight for adequate income. But we don't think that basic income, as it is likely to emerge in this present political neoliberal context, is going to be what the left libertarians want it to be. It's going to be designed by the architects of the neoliberal agenda. It's going to suit the interests of the Silicon Valley crowd. It's not going to be based on people's wishes. It's going to be based on an existing political reality.